Okay, this is my third video in the Createx Transparent Sealer. What we're going to talk about in this video is alternative uses of this tool. We're not going to talk about how to use it to prime, to surface, to seal metal, because I've done that in my other two videos. This is actually a really versatile product, and it can do a lot of things that you might not expect. So I'm going to talk about how to use it as an intercoat, how to use it for sealing tape lines, how to use it for bridging different materials like alkyd, epoxy resin, urethane, how to use it for pen and ink, how to use it as a carrier base, and all the rest. So why is a transparent sealer so versatile? Number one, it grips onto just about anything, including alkyd, epoxy resin, urethane, you name it. Number two, the transparent sealer, like all the autoborne sealers, is very easy to sand. Once it's dry, you can go over with 800 or 1000 grit, and you'll have a great surface upon which to paint. Number three, the sealer can actually be built very high. This means you can go over tape lines or any other obstacles that you'd like to cover and get a uniform surface in the end. Number four, the sealer is actually a different material than either urethane or acrylic. This means that you can use it as a dissimilar material to protect both of those types of paint, for instance as an intercoat. Number five, the sealer is really tough. I've A/B'd it against some of the best products on the market, including your typical self-etching primers for automotive painting, Golden's GAC 200 medium, which is the hardest acrylic medium they sell, Novacolor 235, and other intercoats from acrylic manufacturers. Number six, as I mentioned before, the turnaround time for acrylic paints is actually really quick. Within half an hour you can paint over the sealer with water-based materials. So let's get to it and we'll look at some of these applications. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to use the Createx Transparent Sealer to protect urethane. In some situations, such as when you have a really high ratio of solvent, you're at a risk of blowing out the underlying paint layer. So here I have a masonite panel. The bottom section has urethane that I've protected with different intercoats. I'm in the process of hammering it with some solvent. So I have SG100 from House of Color, I have the Createx Transparent Sealer, and then I have a section with just the bare urethane. As you can see from this close-up, the urethane paint has been heavily damaged by the solvent. The SG100 protected it pretty well, but the Createx Transparent Sealer is flawless. So this is a strategy that I use all the time. Bear in mind that you have to give the Createx Transparent Sealer some time to dry before you can apply urethane. Also, since I'm using this for fine art applications, I'm not particularly concerned about build-up and film thickness in the way that, say, a motorcycle or automotive painter would be. On this Rembrandt copy, what I'm doing is I'm using Createx colors and House of Color black and white. Thanks to Steve Gibson for showing me this technique, by the way. What I want to do is I want to protect the white in this image, and so I lay down a coat of the transparent sealer before building up the next layer. As soon as I've done that, I've locked in my work underneath, and I don't have to worry about accidents or blowouts. Next, let's talk about how we can use the sealer in combination with urethane to blot candy bleed from water-based candy colors. So in case you're not aware, the aniline dye particles in candy paints are very small and very mobile. When you put a layer of water-based paints on top of a layer of water-based candy color, the aniline dye particles can actually migrate upwards and infiltrate the upper layer. This is called candy bleed, and it can actually wreak havoc on your plans. In fact, candy colors can walk right through intercoats that you put down. In this photo, you can see that I have used a green candy, covered it with some intercoats, and then applied white over top. Most of the intercoats do nothing to stop the green candy from migrating upwards and ruining the white. So what do we do about this problem? Number one, we can use Createx's new bleed checker. This is an intercoat that's been specially crafted to lock in candy colors and allow you to paint over top without the migration of the small aniline dye particles. If we don't have the bleed checker, then what we can do is we can use a urethane, a dissimilar material so that it's not water-based, in combination with the Createx sealer over top of the urethane. So this image shows you the relative amount of candy bleed using white over top. If we use no intercoat, there's significant bleed and the white ends up looking a little bit green. Createx Transparent Base, which is the resin for the Wicked series, doesn't do much to stop it. The SG100 and the Transparent Sealer, on the other hand, do stop it and give you a nice pure white. Golden GAC 200 actually makes it a little bit worse because it turns the green more yellowish. So let me give you an example. Here I've got a sky that's been blocked in with water-based candies over metal. I'm sealing it with SG100, then I'm going to come back and use the Createx Transparent Sealer over top of it. This technique isn't just for spray guns, however. Here, I've got a painting that's entirely Createx Wicked and Candy 2.0 colors. I want to protect those Candy 2.0 colors, so I'm using a 0.4mm Olympus airbrush to come in and put down some SG100. After that, I'll be able to come back with the Createx Transparent Sealer, also applied with a 0.4mm airbrush. So you can use this technique on small paintings and models. As a third application, we can put the sealer to use on tape and masking material. If there's imperfections in your painting surface or if the tape or masking material isn't pressed down firmly, paint can bleed underneath it. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to flood the sealer on since it's transparent, allow it to dry, and then we have confidence that our paint's not going to creep underneath the tape or the mask. So a material that I use all the time is epoxy resin. I use epoxy resin as a really thick intercoat when I want to get a lot of depth in a painting. And it turns out the Createx Sealer is fantastic at resurfacing resin so you can paint on subsequent layers. So here I have a layer that's been damaged by sanding with 800 grit sandpaper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small airbrush, because it's a small painting. I'm going to use the transparent sealer to go back and put on a new paint layer and then apply additional layers of Createx paint to it. You can see from the video that what I've done is I've basically resurfaced the epoxy resin with the transparent sealer. The shine from the candy colors is back again. It's not too glossy, which means it's not too smooth, so I can go back and paint on it with acrylics again. Here's another example of using the transparent sealer over epoxy, this time on an oil painting. More controversially, if you've ever used industrial or artist-grade alkyd paints, you know that these types of paints dry very slowly, but they create an incredibly hard, inflexible paint layer. They're also very difficult to paint over, so you're advised not to paint over alkyd or oil paint with acrylic. Of course, I had to try to break that rule with the help of the transparent sealer. So here we have an exercise, again courtesy of Steve Gibson, in which I've used multiple different types of materials. We have ground metal, the transparent sealer used to prime it, a layer of candy color, Candy 2.0 by Createx, a layer of epoxy resin, and then alternating layers of urethane grayscale and alkyd transparent colors. So here, every time I switch media, I let the underlying layer dry and then put a layer of the Createx Transparent Sealer on top. So far, after working on this painting off and on for about 8 months, I've seen no cracking and no difficulties, including leaving it out in the cold, in the Seattle humidity, and also in the sun. Although this is an experimental technique and not a particularly fast one, the fact that the sealer can grab alkyd and survive my scratch tests and heat tests is pretty impressive. Next, let's talk about how we can use the transparent sealer as a carrier or binder for pigments. So Createx makes a lot of different colors of sealer, but let's assume for the moment that I can't find the particular color I'm after and I can't emulate it. So, as an oil and acrylic painter, maybe I want to use yellow ochre. So I've got some Gamblin yellow ochre. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a transparent sealer as a binder for it. So I have an incredibly cheap mixing setup. All I have is a $30 magnetic stirrer. I have some pigment and a funnel. To disperse the pigment in the sealer, I'm going to use a really simple technique of getting a little vortex going in the center, adding small bits of pigment, and then letting it sit overnight. This is not a great way to make paints, but it's a simple way. Now that my paint is ready, it's time to spray it. I'm going to make sure I have a really thick surface on this one because I want to do oil painting over it. So I'm probably going to do 3 or 4 passes. So there we have it, a nice thick surface of genuine yellow ochre pigment on steel created using the very strong transparent sealer from Createx. Now we can also use this material on wood directly, and in fact the Createx sealers have some distinct advantages on wood that I'll talk about in a later video. So this is a bit of an esoteric one, but I've found that the Createx Transparent Sealer can actually enable you to do multimedia with pen and ink. The trick with pen and ink is that you need a surface that's smooth enough for the pen to flow over it, but it can't be too rough or bumpy enough that the hard surface will disperse the ink in ways that you don't want. To set up your surface for pen and ink, apply a generous coat to the Createx Transparent Sealer, and then sand with 1000 grit sandpaper lightly. Most modern waterproof inks will work perfectly fine with the transparent sealer. The drying time is going to depend on which ink you choose. I've tested this with rapidographs, with Copic markers, with Staedtler Lumicolors. All gave me good results. Mistakes can be corrected with erasers, or with some wax and grease removers that won't harm the transparent sealer itself. It's best to wait 48 hours for the sealer to fully cure before trying any hard erasing or putting any solvents upon it. Leaving aside applications in automotive painting and fine art, the Createx Transparent Sealer also has a lot of potential uses in the realm of modeling and miniature painting. Acrylic paints are without doubt one of the most important types of paints in modeling and miniature painting today. The problem is that acrylics aren't the strongest paints by themselves, and they're not really meant to take a lot of rough handling. This is particularly true for metal models such as this one. By using a generous coat of the transparent sealer underneath the final varnish, what we're doing is providing an extra layer of very strong epoxy protection against damage. If the final varnish is a matte finish, you'll never know it was there in the first place. One of the major drawbacks of acrylic paints in general is that they attract dust like mad. This goes for both modeling paints and fine art paints. As you can see in this model, which has been in storage for 8 or 10 months in a dusty environment, dust covers almost every millimeter of the surface, making it very hard to continue the paint job. Now take a look at this model, which received a double coat of the Createx Transparent Sealer before being placed in the same environment as the other one, for the same amount of time. The difference is that the epoxy in the Createx Transparent Sealer doesn't have the same dust-attracting properties as an acrylic. Our last technique in this little demo is glazing. So glazing is a common technique in oil and acrylic painting. Imagine we have a substrate with a couple of layers of paint. What we're going to do is we're going to put a thick layer of transparent or translucent paints on top of it to pull the underlying colors and give the painting more richness. So in this image, what we have is a sky that's been made from Createx Candy 2.0 colors over steel. What I've also done is I've used grays to create a little bit of cloud cover subtly. I want a glaze to bring back the grays of the clouds towards the underlying blue of the candy-coated steel. So all I'm going to do is take the Createx Transparent Sealer and add a couple drops of Createx Wicked Blue. This is a phthalo blue that's a little bit more translucent than a typical candy color, and I'm going to use that to great effect in pulling the underlying colors of my painting together. So I'm going to load everything into a spray gun and I'm going to apply a few coats to get a really thick glaze. So there we have it. There's 10 more uses for the Createx Transparent Sealer. I'm sure you can find more applications than the ones that I've outlined here, but I think this gives you a sense of how versatile and useful this product is.